Joining me now is Terry Turchie, former Deputy Assistant Director of the Counterterrorism Division of the FBI. He wrote the book In Their Own Words. I understand after he was with us last time, a lot of you ordered the book. I hope if you didn't, you'll do so now. Just go to Amazon, type in Their Own Words. You'll see it subtitled The Communist Party's, or Democrat Party's push, I should say, toward a communist America. He has been warning about the weather underground types infiltrating the DOJ and then hijacking the FBI for their own cause. I want to ask him tonight about what we just talked about, and then also what he makes of this new documentation that's come out stating the Biden administration gave approval of deadly force to be used during the raid on Mar-a-Lago. Joining me now is my friend Terry Turchie. Terry, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Brannon. Thanks for having me, as always.
Thank you for being with us tonight, Terry, as always. What do you make of what I was just sharing in regards to the communist tactic to get people groups stirred up, to infiltrate, whether it's the civil rights movement, now, of course, picking up this issue of the Gaza Strip, Palestine, and using this to divide America on America's campuses? I would think for someone like you with your background, this seems like deja vu all over again. Instead of the Vietnam War or the Weather Underground, it's now, of course, the Palestinian cause. But it's the same players pulling the strings, is it not, Terry?
It is, Brannon. And unfortunately, there are not enough people like you out talking about this all the time. Over the last decades, we've stopped talking about communism. We've stopped talking about communist ideology. And now we're paying a terrible, terrible price. We like to talk about Marxism. We like to talk about academic Marxists. We like to talk about the deep state. But while all of those various aspects of this are relevant, we're still now bothered by, troubled by, and now at war with. America is already at war. Most of us just don't know it. We're already at war with these people in a way that they're winning, and they're winning big time. You know why? They've infiltrated in the last few years. Joe Biden has opened the door. Barack Obama kind of built the door, and Joe Biden has opened it up, and he has let communist ideology take over the institutions of the U.S. government. Today, when you see Donald Trump sitting in that court in New York, and then you hear that the judge who is presiding over that trial has a daughter who's basically a radical, rabid revolutionary leftist. And the greatest example of what's going on in the Democratic Party is just the other day when they had the big fight on the floor of the House. And I understand that was actually predicated when Republicans came back from New York and said, hey, we want to ask you, is anybody in this room in the Democratic Party also getting advice and paying her and kind of going down that same road? And I guess they never got an answer to that question, but the place erupted. They're not going to answer that question because they are actively undermining our government, and they are composed of socialist Democrats, progressives. 98 of, I think there's 213 or so Democrats in Congress, in the House. 98 of those are declared members of the Progressive Caucus. That's almost half. So they may be quiet and they may not all be equally loud about their declarations in public, but nonetheless, our government is already, in our institutions, what we find precious, that always was neutral and tried to do the best thing for every American, is now busily working away at adopting communist ideology into our government. And they've given it names. They've given it names like critical race theory and DEI. Look at the money that is being spent on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And of course, in the old Soviet Union, they didn't call this lack of meritocracy anything close to DEI. But everybody was equal. Everybody was treated with equality. And the Soviet Union collapsed flat on its face because of that. And now America is stricken with the same problem. And Joe Biden, in order to cover this, gets on the airwaves every night and lies. You have to lie. None of this stuff works. 5-year plans and 10-year plans and telling people they can't have a gas stove in their kitchen. None of this stuff works. But I'll tell you what it does produce, and this goes to the heart of our education system. It produces, and you are, as far as I'm concerned, I watched both of the two-part special on indoctrination about a year and a half ago. You've really set this out there as to the role of education and the role of politicians, the outspoken ones like AOC and others like that, part of the squad, which is another whole problem that we haven't dealt with at all. These people are masters at lying, at indoctrination, and at repeating the message. And they repeat it essentially from some quarter, some direction, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we have been largely silent on communist ideology and what it means. So how can people, even if we get upset with people and attribute all kinds of things to them as to why they're not awake or they're not paying attention, in a way, how can we do that when for so long now our institutions have just turned their back on trying to educate people to this threat? Think about the last few years. Christopher Wray has been in front of Congress, let's just say going back constantly since Joe Biden was inaugurated. What has Christopher Wray said about the threat to America? What have his counterparts in the agency and the National Intelligence Director, what have they been saying? The threat America faces is essentially from right-wing radicalism and right-wing hate. And let's just say we'll call this white supremacy and white privilege. We have had that drugged down our throat for several years now. They merely echoed what Biden said when he stepped up there and gave one of the worst inaugural addresses in the history of this country. It was about hate of a certain group of people. It was a generalized statement. And had I been working the Eric Rudolph case in the mountains of North Carolina with 100 other people away from their families and away from their homes, and had we talked like that in that little quarter of the country back in 1998, we'd have all been pulled out of there and sent home, and then we would have had to try and defend ourselves so we didn't get fired. But now somehow, these years later, he can get by with that. He can get by with taking terrorism or intelligence type matters and information, and he can attribute to a half of our population that you're hateful, you're angry, you're a problem, and a problem that really could rise to an investigation by the federal government because you're white, or because you're male, or because you won't actually acknowledge, admit, and then get down on your knees and beg for forgiveness because of what you've done to America. That isn't the Democratic Party. That is right out of the mouth and the mouths of the worst offenders during the Cold War that we used to call the enemy overseas. I can tell you something. I did not see this in North Carolina, where people thought, some people in America thought that those people would eat us up. They didn't. Now, they had ornery people there. I'm not going to say that. And there were people who still had vestiges of what I would have to call racism from years and years ago. But the vast majority of people in those little mountain towns saw it for what it was. You cannot go around bombing abortion clinics. We hate abortion. You cannot go around, though, and bomb clinics and kill policemen who are working part-time to protect the people working there. I despise abortion. But for a year, I stood there in those mountains, and I tried, a big part of our job was to calm the people down who thought we were there, to go after they had the term Christian fundamentalists. Well, we were not there for that reason. We were there because Eric Rudolph was alleged to have murdered a policeman with a terribly awful bombing that he laid in the trees and waited till the police officer bent over that bomb, and then he automatically remotely detonated it. Don't tell me that has anything to do with race or anything else. It has to do with the hate in a man's heart. Theodore Kaczynski, the same way. Theodore Kaczynski's bombings had no logic. He was mentally ill. Now, was he mentally ill where he didn't understand right from wrong? No, he was not. Was Eric Rudolph mentally ill from where he didn't understand right from wrong? No, he was not. He knew exactly what he was doing. But we found that terrorists, especially that kind of type of lone terrorist, we don't understand them a whole lot. We understand that they stay low on the radar. They probably committed other crimes, but they may have never gotten caught. Crimes that certainly didn't rise to what they eventually started to do. But they did it out of hate, and they justified it by reaching into the issues of the day and trying to sound logical and reasonable and intelligent. They were none of those things. They were just simply mad bombers, and they were hard to catch because they had no friendships, they had no connections, and that was their problem. They had no connections. They had no way to communicate. Now, how many bombings have we had like that since we bargained with Kaczynski? You could say, "Hey, we'll publish your manifesto, even though you have not promised to stop bombing," because he didn't. He said, "I reserve the right to commit sabotage, but we're going to say, okay, we're going to the Post and the Times and the AG, the Attorney General, and we're going to recommend that your manifesto be published." And, we didn't do that because we felt he would stop. We did it because he was hateful. Why is all this important? You have to stay connected and tied to the specific details and facts in terrorism or counterintelligence, or you will wander until you are lost in the woods. And that is what the Democratic Party has done. They have said that half of the people in this country may be terrorists because they go to church on Sunday, or they go and they're mad when they go to school board meetings and confront these radical revolutionary school board members. That is not even reasonable. To go to Roger Stone's house early in the morning, and we do make arrests early in the morning. It's a great time to go out there. But to go to a man who did nothing his entire life that was violent and was essentially being looked at for, again, all this political junk, that was the power of the state. But it wasn't the power of the American state. It was the power of communist ideology that has infected our institutions. Look what they did to compound that. They leaked it to CNN. Yeah, I know. CNN said, "Oh, no. We analyzed our way through that because there was a different level of activity the day before and that morning." Well, that's a lie. Okay, that's just a lie from CNN. They were there at the specific location. The FBI was performing for them. Period. And it turns my stomach. And that is what happens when you allow this ideology to get inside your constitutional republic. Let's not forget something, and I'll stop with this so that you can take this where you want to take it, Brannon. But let's not forget that during Barack Obama's time in office, he and Mr. Biden, they succeeded. The Egyptian Brotherhood was running Egypt for a little while because of Barack and Joe Biden. But the Egyptians said, no. You're out of here. And they took action themselves. Meanwhile, over in Gaza, the Palestinians, elected the Gazan crowd, the Hamas crowd, to run the place. Do you really want me to believe? Do we think Americans really, really down deep believe that that the Palestinians didn't know Hamas was hanging out in the basements, in the ground under the hospitals? Do we really believe that? Why, for crying out loud, they were probably bending backwards to serve these people in 100 different ways. So what do? What is our response now that good old Joe is the president of the United States? Well, Grandpa Joe is providing material support and assistance to terrorism, but he's not alone. It's essentially inside the Democratic Party plank. What I'm saying is this: we don't have to worry now that the Soviet Union is all over us and undermining our government and undermining our elections and infiltrating the country with communist spies and trying to use, political operatives to destroy the constitutional republic. The Democrats have picked up the torch for them. The Democratic Party no longer cares about America, period. And the sooner we realize that, and the sooner we realize the methodologies and the communist ideology strategy that they've adopted, the better off we'll all be. And then we'll be able to turn around and fight back. Right now, we're not fighting back because we haven't even come close to connecting the dots, and they are moving quickly. They are moving very quickly because they know that the last thing they need is for Donald Trump to get back in the White House, not because he's going to be vengeful, but because he's going to this time know that I can really assemble a good team and we'll go after where the real insurrection and the real revolution and the real problems are. Because if we don't, 15 years from now, and that may be, I mean, some people say you think it's going to be 15 years, it may be just 15 months. If Biden sticks around and the freak show that he has in office, because there's depth there, it's not the kind of depth you want on the bench, but these people will kill this country if they're allowed to continue on, and they have much more time to do it.
And now you know, folks, why we so appreciate Terry Turchie's not only service to our country, but the service he keeps going, including by this book. And again, we were told that after he was with us last time, that a lot of you bought this book. And again, I hope you just came to the realization if you don't have it, you need it, because he's telling you and he's connecting those dots he was talking about from a historical standpoint that most Americans just don't know this history. You need to buy this book. I get nothing for saying this other than an educated populace. People say we need to save the country. I'm tired of hearing people say we need to save the country. Where's your plan? One of the plans for saving the country needs to be, as Terry's doing right now, education and history, facts, exposing the people that are infiltrating our government and their ideology. And this is the kind of book you need to give to your police of chief, your chief of police, your sheriff deputy, your city council, your county commissioners, your pastor, your associate pastors. Give them out. This guy has the credibility. It's called, in their own words, the Democrat Party's push for a communist America. Terry, I don't know if you want to mention it just very, very briefly before I ask you a couple more questions here, but you told me once, and I know it's a lengthy story, but you told me once that when you got there into the hills of North Carolina, some of the, quote, militias, end quote, some of them were being accused of doing some things, taking a shot into a building that I think your team had occupied and set up as their offices. And if you'd gotten all riled up and said, yeah, that's who did it, and went after them, it could have been a real mess. But cooler heads, you leading the team, cooler heads in your team prevailed. You found out it wasn't militias, and that the militias actually were wanting this guy to be caught, correct?
Sure, that's a good point. First of all, we had a great team, and we had ATF, some really key ATF people that I just adored, and we had people from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, from the North Carolina Bureau of Investigation, from the Georgia Correctional Department. They brought in a lot of people to protect our command post and the grounds that we were on, and then we had a massive amount. It was the largest operation at that time, and it certainly was the longest. It went on for well over a year. And we had upwards of sometimes 250 people in those woods out all day in teams. We had the Georgia Air National Guard, for example, Customs and Treasury, and all of these agencies. I think at one time we had reached 20 agencies working together. And all of the discord about jurisdiction and all this, it all vanished. It all disappeared. It was a wonderful experience because it was what we're supposed to do. Yes, we were there to catch a deadly terrorist who killed a policeman, but we were also there to lower the temperature. So how do you lower the temperature in a small community in the mountains when you weren't that many years out at that point from Waco and Ruby Ridge, and you've got the principals in Ruby Ridge, in fact, like Colonel Greitz and Randy Weaver coming out to the mountains. They were out there a couple of weeks leading a team of militia to look for Eric Rudolph. They brought their intelligence group to come out and help find him. And, that's a whole other story. But during all of this, and then in the aftermath, our command post was attacked in the middle of the night. It was one of the nights, I can't remember the exact day of the week, but where the supervisors of all these different agencies I mentioned, and one of us would use where we were living, because most of us we're staying since we were there long term. We're staying in these different small houses or cabins or whatever. And so we would have a night where we invited everybody else and we'd make dinner and that kind of thing. So we were all there. We had no cell phones then because they weren't around, but we had beepers. Well, all our beepers go off at the same time. We're like, what's going on? Our command post had been attacked. Let me back up. Earlier, we were told that there's something going on at the local high school. And a couple of helicopters flew over the local high school. One had a laser light shined at it. One of the SWAT teams responded through the streets of this little town. They get up there. They see a guy running, jumping in a car, and somebody was driving it. They pick him up, take him to the police station, and then they both run into the police station. So we got a SWAT vehicle with about 5 or 6 guys parked outside in front. We have these guys in the police station. So we sent some people up there, and they try to talk to them. They won't talk to them. So several hours went by as they finally were able to interview them, but they weren't really saying anything. So at about that time, a couple hours earlier, our command post had been attacked by a car that went by the outside road on the perimeter, fired 8 shots into the command post. 2 of the agents actually could feel the air separating the hair as those casings went flying in the air past past their skull. Within, it was just so close. They could have both been killed. And those rounds were fired through doors. They had each entered or gone through about 2 doors before they felt this. So the command post was under attack. Well, we were still trying to get there when we had teams going out, and they were in the yards and not yards, but the big grass fields and some of the forest fields around the command post, kind of advancing forward to try to see what was going on and, find out if people were still out there. Or at that time, they didn't know it was a car that flew by there. And so when we got back there, there's just there's people everywhere going in, out. Right? So I said, look, I stopped the SWAT team commander. I said, look, get everybody back in this building. And I'm not sure he thought it was a great idea, but he said, that's not our standard operating. I said, well, it is here. Get them back in this building. So we got everybody back in that building, and we went into except for the people just kind of observing outside and making sure we were, had some protection. And it was very dark by this time, of course. And we sent some more people up to the police station to try to have a breakthrough there and find out what the heck was going on. And we had an hour or so of a meeting there, like, okay, let's get all the facts of what we know, not what we think we know. What do we know about what happened and when and everything else? So everybody did a good job. People that knew something, volunteered it. And we had a great conversation under a lot of pressure. The guys called from the police station, said we're still not getting much. So I said, well, my colleague, Don Bell was an ATF ASAC out of Charlotte. We'll be up there. And he'd been in Vietnam and just the greatest guy. And we went up there, he and I. We went to the police station. We talked to our guys. And I said, look, I'll take the guy who was shining the laser light. Don and I want to talk to him. You two keep talking to the other guy. The other guy had admitted he was a neighbor. This guy that was shined the laser light was one of the local militia guys, young guy. So we bring him in, we start talking to him, and he's just messing with us. Finally, I said, look, if you've got a rifle like the one that attacked us, you're in trouble here. That's why. He looks at me and he's like, what are you talking about? Nobody attacked anybody. I said, our command post was attacked while you were up there messing around to school, shining lights and blinding helicopter pilots. What are you, stupid? And he goes, nobody that I know did that. And it was a totally different thing. So by this time, we're hearing noise outside. We all get up and we look out the window. On one side of the sidewalk is the militia from, some other city. And they're all, abuzz. And then on the other side are the 6 SWAT guys like, what's going on? I mean, what do we do here? So, but they were really keeping calm, and I'm so proud of these guys. So I looked at my newfound friend. I said, "Look, this town's going to rip apart here because of your stupid antics. Do you have a 306 caliber rifle?" He said, "Yeah, I do." "Where is it?" "It's at my house." I said, "So here's the plan. Don and I, you're going to jump in that Jeep with us, because his house was around the block. And we're going to go with you, and we're driving, and you're going to go in. We're going to go in, and you're going to give us that rifle, because we've been told now that's the kind of weapon that was used to shoot into our command post." Well, this guy is like, fine, I'll get you the rifle, whatever. So I said, okay, so before you do that, I'm going to go out there and talk to the SWAT team, and you're going to go talk to your buddies on the sidewalk here who are making a lot of noise. And he goes out and talks to them, and they're, they're just like really worked up. I mean, they are just really worked up. And this is out in front of the police department in Andrews, North Carolina. And I go talk to the SWAT team. "Okay, what do you want us to do, Ter?" He said, "I want you to just stay put. We're going to go around the corner and get this rifle that he says he has." And he said, "You can't go around the corner with this mob here and this guy, and we don't." I said, "Look, it's the only thing we can do. We cannot. You guys stay here and try. If you stay here, I'm hoping they'll stay here. But if they move, let them move. Just, I don't want another major escalation of something here, and it's we're just going to have to do what we think is best. I don't know what else to say, but I just don't want to have you facing off with all these guys." Well, he was great. He said, I guess I don't need to tell you. I think that's a bad idea." I said, "I'm not going to tell you it's a good idea either, but it's about what we have to do." And that's the conversation we had in the middle of the night. So Don and I jump in the Jeep, and these guys they're kind of standing on the sidewalk, the militia mob. But, that was, as we would find out soon, not going to last too long. So we go around the block, we get to the house, and there's a porch, and, the minute we get there, and I don't even know how this could happen, these guys, I guess they must have left instantly and had another way over. They start coming out of the woodwork. I mean, they are coming out from behind trees. It's like pitch black up there, They're coming out from behind the bushes, the trees. They surround us on the porch. And about this time, our newfound friend runs in, and the last thing we hear is the slamming of the screen door and the lock. And Don looks at me, I look at Don like, oh my gosh. So first words out of the militia guy's mouth after, "Oh, you're from San Francisco. You're probably gay." And that's not the word he used. He goes, you better get out of here fast. I said, "Well, we're not going anywhere. You guys are going somewhere, but we're not going anywhere." And then he starts, they start raising their voices, and then they start coming in closer, and then, "You guys have no business here. You're the government, and you're no good." And, he didn't do anything. I said, "Look, we've heard all that before. You've heard what we've said about that. We're here to pick this guy up, to get him out of here safely, and to let him have his day in court. And don't tell me you don't believe that. You may not believe it now, but you believed it at some time." And then they chime in. But you know what? They started talking to us. I said, "There's 2 of us. What do you think we're going to do? We came up here in good faith." And I'm not going to say I liked him, but they started changing their tone. Why? Because most of these militia guys are not really wanting trouble. They want, they want you to think they want trouble, but they're not Theodore Kaczynski and they're not Eric Rudolph, and they don't want those people near them. And that's what we found in the major studies we did. They're in this because it's a social thing. And you have to be so careful at separating one from the other, or you're going to have a toxic combination that inevitably will result in something far worse. And that's exactly what we've seen during the entirety of the Biden administration. We learned this in the early days of the Counterterrorism Division, but we'd already learned it in the lessons that countless FBI agents had practiced out on the street for years as they worked without the structure, by the way, of a Counterterrorism Division. Because remember, it was the newest operational investigative division. There are only three. There was always the investigative division, criminal investigative, and the counterintelligence division, but there was never a actual counterterrorism division in the FBI until 2001. So, until 2000, March of 2000, when it was approved and funded by Congress and certainly passed on by the AG, Janet Reno. So anyway, about this time, as this conversation is going on and this story kind of starts to end, guess what? Our newfound friend comes out of the house. He puts the 306 up in the air. Don Bell does one of these hands across my face, grabs that rifle, grabs me by the collar and says, "Terry, we're out of here." And we go down to the Jeep. We get in the Jeep, we drive off, and we're driving down the road. He looks at me, there's like a minute of quiet. He looks at me, he goes, in this Southern, voice, "Terry, I found Vietnam to be the most dangerous, treacherous place I'd ever been until right now up on that porch." And he goes, "That's the dumbest thing I have ever done in my life." And we get up to the corner, we turn the corner, we jump out. The SWAT, you could see the SWAT team commander just like, take a deep breath, like, oh my gosh. And, we headed out. And so how did that all come together? Well, before that ever happened.
And by the way, that wasn't his gun, right? He didn't do the shooting.
It had nothing to do with the shooting. We sent it to the FBI lab. The people who drove, but we opened a new case. We spent, the next 2 days calming everybody at FBI headquarters down. And we opened a new case on who assaulted federal officers. Well, it turned out it was one of the topics we discussed that night. 2 town drunks had been released from prison. They'd been serving a prison sentence. And they got back to town that night. And there were actually 3, I guess there were 3 because they picked up a buddy. And after they got really good and shellacked, they decided for the sake of justice, and it had nothing to do with social justice or criminal justice or anything, for the sake of justice, they probably meant to say justice, for the sake of all we just did and got drunk, we're going to go by and chase these critters out of town. And they drove by the command post and fired 8 shots through countless doors. And seriously, we were so fortunate. We were so grateful that these fellows didn't get killed that night. And they shot up the command post and then kept speeding. So we had something we'd been working for, and this gets to my point. We've been working with the community for 7 or 8 months. And we divided the Nantahala National Forest into patrol jurisdictions. And I said, here's your job. Go knock on doors. Let these people get to know you. Get rid of the clothes we've been wearing, the camouflage, this and that. Just go out. This is your big chance. You always in an office want to wear jeans and sweatshirts. Go wear them and be fun with it, and go out and let these people get to see your face and know who you really are. 2 of the guys got a call from their area, and it was one of these families in the middle of the night. They said, we saw something weird. We don't know if it means anything, but out there over by the pond, we saw a car speed by, made a lot of racket. But we looked at the window, and when we looked at the window, we saw him throwing something in the lake. And he said, well, what did it look like? It looked to us like a rifle. And we knew that, these guys we're looking for are probably, town drunks or something. As it turned out, it took about 1.5 years, but we had a team that we carved out. And by golly, they got these names. They followed a number of themes and theories, but one of them was, could we have some people that maybe were just recently let out of prison? Sure enough, came up with these guys, then found they'd been drinking that night, then found one of them said such and such, and then went out and they all started tripping all over each other and lying and everything. All got arrested and they all got sent off to prison again. And it had nothing to do with Rudolph. It had nothing to do with anything other than these guys got wasted and decided to attack the command post. And the community.
Wow. And if you had not handled that the way you had, and let the maybe people say it was militia, you would have opened up a whole nother front that wasn't there, and you were able to de-escalate that situation and not have another, Waco, Ruby Ridge, some kind of situation, and you were able to get the right people. And I guess the point to be made is when the government runs around claiming every person who's maybe in some cases a little different, sometimes some of them, or maybe a little extreme, but not terrorist, maybe a little country, maybe a little, quote, militia, as you said, a social club. Maybe they're concerned about the United Nations. Maybe they're concerned about open borders. It doesn't mean you're a militia, but if that's what a group is about and they're called militia, that doesn't mean they're terrorists. That doesn't mean they want to shoot up the FBI building in town that's, your command center, as you say. And at the end of the day, you were able to keep calm, go with the facts, de-escalate the situation, and stop something from happening that could have been absolutely horrific in that town. Is this the kind of model the government should be following today instead of labeling everybody they disagree with a militia terrorist?
Well, you see, that's a really interesting point. And I hope people don't misunderstand this, but the government shouldn't be involved in terrorism. It should be the FBI and law enforcement agencies involved in terrorism. Now, are they government? Yes. Do they know what they're doing, or at least did they? I think they did. I learned a lot of this stuff from the people that went before me. This is how we handle stuff years ago. And but there's another little part of this story that is not little. It's very important. We'd made up our minds that night that we were going to go to and we talked to him late at night, the assistant U.S. attorney, and said, look, we want the book thrown at these guys. I mean, go after this guy, especially this idiot that shined this laser light, on the helicopter pilot. And so, that was kind of how we left it that night. Well, the next morning, one of the things we'd done weeks earlier, Don Bell and I had visited, how the clergy in little towns, whether it's, it's everybody. It's the Lutherans, the evangelicals, the Baptists, the Catholics, the synagogue, all of them, they would get together for these little monthly meetings, and they'd have in the basement of the Lutheran church, and they'd have snacks and drink, like coffee and soda and stuff. Well, I had met the Lutheran minister, and he brought this up, and he said, you guys are invited if you'd like to come and chat with us about, your public message on, just what you're doing and how. I said, we'd love to. So Don and I went there, and you know how those things turn out. We're sitting in a big circle, and, it came up, I guess it's going to come up. We were outnumbered, for crying out loud. Do you believe in God, or do you? Well, yeah, and I told them my story. I told them the minute, that, years earlier when I was a little kid, what happened and the circumstances that led me down that road. And I said, and so when I go out on these assignments, that's never far away, especially the kind of things we work today. And I think they were all, felt good that we were that honest with them. And they certainly believed us. And so we had a great meeting. I mean, it was like a 2-hour meeting. And so I said, and look, we're here to help you get through this. This is not easy, but my gosh, you're the you're kind of the foundation of these little communities up here that make up Murphy and Andrews and the towns up here. And we just had a great time. It was one of the real fun memories of the time there, but there were several that were where the people really shine through. So the call is from my Lutheran minister friend, but the call that he received was from another minister. And you won't even believe what the story was. One of his parishioners came in and was just crushed that morning. He was scared. He didn't know what to do. His whole life was on the verge of being ruined. I said, who might that be? Well, it was the guy that shined the laser light that, was in church all the time and I guess everybody thought he was a good guy. And I'm not saying he wasn't, but, he was just beside himself. And he'd already heard that, that there could be big trouble here. You'd go to prison. And, he was good about it. The ministry said, I don't know what you can do, but I said, I don't know. Let me try to think this through. So I went back, and as I always did, I didn't like to make decisions, just especially when I was like, everybody knew how I felt the night before. So I called the guys in. I said, here's where we're at. Here's the story. We've wanted a major development which would calm tensions here. What happened last night certainly shouldn't calm any tensions. However, maybe we can turn it in our favor. And well, so what are you saying, Terry? And I laid out to them the call that they'd gotten, that this guy was really, I guess, obviously this is not how guilty people act. So it was just more, in our opinion. It's your instinct, but still, I trust my instinct before I trust just about anything. And so I said, I'd like to have us call the AUSA back and say, and I'll call him with you, but you guys know him because you work with him. I'd like him to consider not going down that road. And they go, oh my gosh, okay, we understand, but I don't know if that's going to be so easy to park that train now. And so, okay, let's just do this. So a couple of us go back to the office, and they get him on the phone, and we have the conference call, and so they're they work with him, so they're kind of, and I'd only talked to him the night before for some time, so they get it all squared away, and so then okay, Terry, so tell him your latest. So I said, well, thanks for all the work last night and all the help, and wow, you really were wonderful. I said, we've got a little bit of a hang up. All that stuff I told you last night, I think maybe we should consider not going down the road. And it's like this long pause. He said, what happened this morning? And so I went into it, and I told him about the ministers and the calls, and he said, well, what are you proposing? I said, you know what? The guy's never been in trouble. We've got that. He said, yeah, I've got it in front of me too. We did some work this morning on that too. He's just, sometimes he veers towards loudmouth, but he's not a bad guy. He's been in this community for years. I said, yeah, so I'm glad we agree on that. Well, I guess my proposal is I'd like him to have federal pretrial diversion. And there's another long pause, and he goes, really? And I said, yes. He said, have you spoken with the director of the FBI about it? I said, I wanted to talk to you first. And so, long story short, he said, Jerry, I'm not as opposed to that as you think. I mean, when you really start to talk through this, it's stupidity compounded by stupidity. And I'm sure you're not too insulted that this is the first time somebody might have lied to you for a couple of minutes. So I said, yeah, no, that's common with our constituents. So anyway, so he said, well, talk to him and tell him that I'm willing to do pretrial diversion for both of them. The guy that, that picked him up and your new friend here. So, we had been keeping the Bureau advised. And so I went back to my office and I called Louis, and he was always accessible. This is another thing that when I finished this story,
is the FBI director, Louis Freeh. So you called Louis Freeh and said, we want to do pretrial diversion on these guys. And so you had to call the FBI director.
Well, I said, Louis, I got a call from a minister this morning. He says, well, that's good. I wish you'd call last night. Anyway, I went through the whole story, and he said, I can live with that. And that turned out to be a turning point. The tensions for us and the community calmed after that, because the word got to them right away through their church, not through me, not through the papers, through their minister that they trusted. And it was a whole different assignment for the next 8 months, because people were not listening to the loudmouths. And in fact, some of the loudmouth types were no longer. And so I think that the point there is this: the FBI I just described to you is not the FBI you've seen in action the last 8 years. It's not. So a story is worth 1,000 words. None of these people combined, collectively, or anything, none of them worked as much domestic counterterrorism as that team and myself in the years before we left the Bureau. So they don't need to tell me, well, you don't know what you're talking about. And that's why none of them have ever said that. And I'm not trying to brag here. I'm just saying this type of stuff that has gone on in our government is indicative of one thing, maybe two. It's indicative of the compromise of the government and the FBI, the complete and total compromise around the communist ideology of diversity, equity, inclusion, and hate and white supremacy, and buying in to all that crap. And that's a problem. That's a much bigger problem than any of the problems we've talked about now, because the FBI is the foundation of protecting us, and it is not doing it. It is making things worse. Look at their silence since October. Look at their conduct since January, and look at their lack of any curiosity, of any type of intellectual, depth since the riots of the summer of 2020. All of it is lacking, and that's not even getting into case after case after case after case of just massive misfires. Now, that is not the FBI that was working in the mountains of North Carolina. I'm sorry. And I don't care who was leading it or who was there. That was not us. And it was not those 250 people representing all those agencies. And that is what is sad. And you're well aware, my friend Brian Shepard. Well, Brian made a statement years ago when I was working on this book, and I would call him very, very frequently and talk to him about thoughts and ideas. And I've said this to you before, but Brian made it very clear. He said, Terry, as the FBI goes, the country goes. If the FBI collapses, the country will not be far behind. And I'm sure that the old people in the Soviet Union would say the same, because essentially the KGB collapsed on them and the Soviet Union collapsed not too long after. So we're in a dangerous situation. And I'll kind of close this part with this. With people who believe, and we didn't get into so much stuff, but we're gonna keep pounding away at all the connectors between, and not just long generic statements, all the connectors between specific people and how you can tell that they've adapted this ideology into our own government on behalf of their party. This is their grand plan, because it gives them power. But we have no one to protect us from that. We have some former agents even who I noticed on LinkedIn, and they're all primarily connected with the Agents Association stuff. So they probably kept their secret clearances, and they probably have contracts with the Bureau. So they're completely compromised, and they'll go out and fight. They're still bad-mouthing Trump. I mean, you would think that after every attack they've leveled against this man, after every case that has turned into a major lie and all been exposed, just today, Fauci now is going down. I mean, now, did we know that? Of course. We knew he was a liar, but now it's all coming out. But the media never backs off. They never back off. Why? Because they're part of the problem. They are Pravda and TASS rolled into one. They have the greatest responsibility aside from the FBI for the truth and getting there. But they do something even worse. They call what they peddle the truth, and in defense of, quote, democracy, and they're lying to you the whole time, and they don't even care. They have to.
And this is, folks, look at this. I want to show this, Terry. Look at this, folks. This is the caucus members, progressive.house.gov. These are the congressional progressive. That means Marxist, folks. Okay, let's just be honest what this is. These are socialist / Marxist / communist, wherever you want to call them, okay? Progressive caucus composed of nearly 100 progressive members of the U.S. House of Representatives and Senate. And the deputy chair is none other than Ilhan Omar there with her hijab on. And we can keep scrolling through, and you see these Sheila Jackson Lee. We have all kinds of people that Rashida Tlaib. You see her. You guys recognize a lot of these. There's Debbie Dingell of Michigan. You guys recognize a lot of these folks who are always on these causes that really is nothing more than. There's Bernie Sanders. He's a Senate member. So again, this is the progressive caucus. It goes on and on, about 100 of them. And folks, progressive, that means socialist. There's Jerry Nadler, socialist / Marxist, whatever you want to call communists, whatever you want to call them, right? This is infiltration at the highest levels of our government. And I'm going to bring you right back to this screenshot. In their own words, the Democratic Party's push for a communist America. Terry, I've loved our conversation tonight. I love the history. I don't know how many times you've told that story, but I love the fact we have that now documented and recorded. So at least history can show there was a day and time when there were FBI agents that were using good old-fashioned American common sense, working with the community, going to the pastors, talking to the clergy in the community, instead of saying the clergy and the pastors and the Christians, the people of faith are the terrorists. You were going to them saying, we want to help you. We identify with you. We want to get in and get out of here. We want to find this Rudolph character, Eric Rudolph, this bomber, and get him arrested and get his day in court and get out of here. And yet, here you were not buying into the things got stirred up that night with the militia, and you worked through it. I don't think we, frankly, have people in charge anymore that would do that. And I hope that a lot of current members of the FBI will listen to this, hear this, and remember that that's what this agency used to be about. And I think a lot of our audience tonight really found this quite fascinating, this history. And again, I hope they'll get your book. And I hope you'll come back, because I'd like to go through some of these caucus members with you and talk a little bit more about their ideology and what they're doing in our House and Senate. What do you think?
Well, absolutely. And if do we have a minute? 1 minute?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just going back at your chart. Bernie Sanders, remember, people ought to think about this, particularly people who have sons and daughters in the military. Bernie Sanders in the worst time in our country, when we were fighting in Vietnam and were engaged, he was traveling. He was traveling to the Soviet Union. He was traveling to Cuba. He was traveling to the mess down in El Salvador and in Nicaragua. And he was providing aid and comfort to the enemy. He was naked. He and his wife both in the Soviet Union, running around at a dinner, and bad-mouthing America. This guy is a problem. He's not a socialist. He's a straight-out believer in communist ideology. Gerald Nadler. Gerald Nadler worked hard as a person on the Judiciary Committee to help pardon underground principals involved in killing Brinks armed car guards and police officers up in a small town in northern New York a long time ago, and Clinton got it teed off so he could sign various types of pardons and things for these people. I mean, this is what these people have been doing for a long time. They're selling us out. And just real quick thought: would you want these people, if America was really at war right now? Is this the crowd that you would want running that war for your country to protect you? It's sure as heck not the one I'd want protecting me.
Wow, well said. Terry Turchie, author of In Their Own Words, The Democratic Party's Push for a Communist America. Folks, I hope you get a copy of the book. Give it to your pastor, your priest, your rabbi, your city council members, your county commissioners, your police chief, your sheriff deputies, your school teachers. Give it to your business friends, neighbors, folks. People have got to wake up and realize, again, we say we got to save the country, but you can't save the country, folks, until you identify the problem. And many, many Americans are shooting at the symptoms. They're talking about the symptoms. They're not getting to the root worldview issue of this poisonous ideology of communism hiding under many names. Terry, as always, Terry, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Brannon. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah, I do as well. And we got a lot of history on the tape tonight. That was awesome. Thank you, Terry. Terry Turchie checking in. Again, author of the book, In Their Own Words. When we get this online, you should share it with friends, folks. Some great history as well.